Alpha King was born deaf until his new maid found something that changed everything. The kingdom of Arinthia lay draped beneath a heavy, gray sky. Brrr. Its mountains cut jagged lines into the clouds, and the wind howled through the valleys like a restless spirit. In the heart of this land rose Castle Valthorn, black as midnight, a fortress of stone and shadow that seemed alive as though the walls themselves breathed with secrets. Inside, King Alaric sat alone in his private hall, his gaze fixed on the frozen courtyard below. Though young, he carried the weight of the crown with a quiet gravity. Protection. His silence was not chosen. He was born deaf, and the world had learned to respect him, or fear him, for it. Burrs. He could not hear the songs of the birds that perched on the castle walls, the laughter of children in the distant village, or the whispers of advisors plotting in corridors beyond the great doors. Yet he could see everything. Every twitch of a hand, every flicker of an eye, every trembling hesitation. He had learned to read the world like a book, one motion at a time. Burn. Still, the isolation gnawed at him, a shadow inside his chest that no kingly title could dispel. On this gray morning, the castle gates opened to admit a new maid. Brr. She was small, with hair the color of autumn leaves, and eyes that shone with curiosity rather than fear. Alara stepped inside carrying only a modest satchel, yet her presence seemed to stir the still air of the hall. The guards regarded her cautiously, but she bowed with quiet confidence. "Bring her to the king," one muttered, though his voice did not carry to Alaric's ears. Brrr. The walk through the halls was long and silent. Servants scurried away as they passed, careful not to meet her gaze.
Alaric observed her from the high balcony where he often lingered, his expression unreadable. Most who entered his chambers approached with a mixture of awe and terror.
Desperation. Many expected a man broken by his own silence, yet they found only calm intensity and an unmistakable power that seemed to radiate from his presence. Beret. Alara stepped inside the hall, and Alaric's eyes found hers. He noted the way she did not avert her gaze, the subtle steadiness in her posture. Brr. Something in her small, unassuming frame defied the atmosphere of fear that clung to the castle like a second skin. "You are the new maid," he signed slowly, his hands precise, almost elegant. Few could understand the language of his hands, for it was as much an art as communication. Alara's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. Berate. Though she did not know the language fully, she watched his hands carefully, intuitively following their shapes. She sensed not only the words, but the weight behind them, the loneliness, the restraint, the unspoken longing. Breath. "I am Alara," she said, her voice soft. "I have come to serve." Alaric's brow furrowed slightly. Voice meant little to him. But she did not speak with fear or false respect. She spoke with honesty. That alone was rare. He gestured for her to follow him to the inner chambers, where light from narrow windows carved patterns across the cold stone floor. The castle was a maze of shadows and corridors, each turn steeped in history and old magic. Alaric's family, once beloved rulers, had been rumored to carry an ancient curse. Some whispered that their bloodline was touched by a spirit of silence, a being that thrived on secrets and isolation. Alaric had never been certain what to believe, though he had grown up with its shadow pressing on him, shaping the way he moved through the world. Alara noticed the relics in the hallways, portraits with eyes that seemed almost alive, suits of armor polished to a ghostly sheen, and tapestries depicting battles she had never learned in school. She ran her fingers lightly along the cool stone walls, feeling the pulse of history beneath her touch. "You must be careful," she signed, though she had only recently begun learning the gestures of the castle. This place. It watches. Alaric's eyes narrowed. Few dared to joke about such things, yet she did not tremble, nor did she speak with mockery. There was courage in her simplicity, a quiet fire that intrigued him. Days passed. Alara learned to anticipate his gestures, to understand the subtle shifts of his gaze, the slight inclinations of his head. She became a bridge between him and the world outside, reading the expressions of those who feared him and translating meaning where words could not reach. For the first time, Alaric felt a flicker of connection, a thread stretching from his isolation into something resembling trust.
Yet the castle held secrets that even he had not fully uncovered.
One evening, guided by curiosity and a strange sense of purpose, Alara ventured deeper into the forbidden wing. The corridors grew narrower, darker, as if the stones themselves resisted her presence. Then, behind a wall of faded tapestries, she found a hidden door, half obscured by shadows. With a cautious push, it creaked open to reveal a chamber frozen in time. Shelves of ancient tomes lined the walls, their spines etched with symbols she did not recognize. Candles, long since extinguished, left a lingering scent of wax and dust. And in the center of the room, resting on a pedestal, was a crystal orb that seemed to hum with a quiet energy, pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat. Alara's breath caught. She did not know why, but she felt drawn to it, as though the orb itself recognized something in her. And then, hidden beneath the pedestal, she found scrolls written in Alaric's handwriting. Though he had never spoken of them, they detailed experiments in sound, vibration, and magic. Methods he had tried in secret to hear the world, to pierce the barrier that his body could not overcome. The realization struck her with awe and fear. The king's silence was more than a physical condition. It was tied to forces older than the castle itself, woven into the legacy of his family. When she returned the scrolls to their hiding place, Alaric appeared in the doorway without a sound. She had not heard him, yet she felt the shift in the air, the weight of his presence. "You were not meant to be here," he signed, voiceless hands moving with sharp precision. Alara met his gaze steadily.
I was curious, she signed back. I had to understand. He studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded.
The walls between them, though still thick, had begun to crack. There was no fear now, only the fragile beginnings of trust. But the castle was restless. That night, the wind clawed at the battlements, rattling the windows with unnatural force. Shadows moved in the corners, and whispers curled through the halls like smoke. Alaric sat in his private hall, staring at the courtyard where frost had begun to form, thinking of Alara. Her presence stirred something long dormant. Hope, or perhaps the dangerous possibility of change.
He knew the court would never accept her.
Nobles whispered of curses and omens, warning that the king's fascination with a mere maid could bring ruin. Yet he could not dismiss the truth in her eyes, the way she saw him not as a silent king or a subject of fear, but as a man capable of feeling deeply, capable of becoming more. Alaric turned his gaze to the distant mountains, imagining the ancient spirits said to dwell there. Perhaps they were watching, waiting to see if he could rise above his fate. Perhaps they had already chosen him for something greater.
Alara, meanwhile, could not sleep. Her thoughts kept returning to the chamber she had discovered.
What was the purpose of the orb? Why had Alaric kept these writings hidden? She realized she had stumbled into something far larger than herself, a destiny intertwined with the silence and power of the king. In the quiet hours before dawn, she resolved to help him, not just as a servant but as a guide to the world he had been denied. And she knew deep in her bones that doing so would change both their lives forever. But even as the first pale light of morning seeped through the castle windows, a shadow moved beyond the walls, watching, patient and aware. It had waited for centuries for someone like Alaric, and for the day when someone like Elara might come to awaken him. And so, the threads of fate began to weave together, fragile yet unbreakable. The king, born of silence, and the maid, unafraid of shadows, were on a path that would challenge the boundaries of power, courage, and the heart itself. The morning mist still clung to the spires of Castle Valthorn, wrapping the black towers in a veil of silver.
Inside, the corridors were colder than usual, as if the stones themselves remembered the secrets of centuries.
King Alaric moved with quiet purpose, his hands trailing along the carved banisters as he made his way toward the chamber where Elara had spent the night organizing the library. He did not knock. She did not expect him to. Their eyes met in a silent acknowledgement, and for the first time a shared understanding passed between them, unspoken yet profound. She saw the storm behind his gaze, the weight of loneliness and restraint, and she knew he felt it as keenly as she did.
Good morning, she signed with a small smile, her hand steady.
Alaric's lips curved faintly. He signed back, slow and deliberate. You are bold for a servant. Do you not fear the castle?
Elara shook her head.
I fear nothing here except for the secrets that hide in the shadows. The corners of his eyes softened. Boldness, curiosity, and courage. These were rare qualities in his world. Yet it was not just her courage that intrigued him. It was her presence, simple and warm, that reminded him of a world he had almost forgotten, one full of human connection, empathy, and understanding. Days passed in a quiet rhythm. Elara began to learn the language of gestures that Alaric had perfected over years, subtle shifts in the tilt of his head, the tension in his fingers, the nuance in his eyes. In return, Alaric began to trust her with his thoughts, scribbling notes, guiding her through the hidden corners of the castle, and showing her relics and tomes that had remained untouched for centuries. The bond between them grew, a fragile thread of trust spun across the silence. Elara discovered that Alaric could sense emotions as vividly as any hearing person could sense sound. Anger, joy, fear, and sadness moved through him like ripples across water, but he rarely let others see these ripples. With Elara, however, he allowed himself small glimpses of vulnerability. A slight slump of the shoulders, a flicker of frustration, a shadow of longing. One evening, as the last light of sunset painted the courtyard gold, Alaric led her to a secluded terrace high above the castle. From there, the entire kingdom stretched beneath them. Forests, rivers, villages, and mountains shrouded in mist. You see this? He signed, pointing toward the horizon. All of this is mine to protect.
And all of it is my cage.
Elara looked at him thoughtfully.
A cage built by fear, not stone.
You can open it if you choose.
He studied her unblinking as if testing whether she truly understood.
And what if I fail? Then you try again, she signed gently.
No, one can fail forever when they are willing to learn. It was the first time Alaric had smiled without restraint, a quiet, almost imperceptible curve of the lips, yet it held the power of sunlight piercing through storm clouds. He did not speak the words aloud, yet the silence itself seemed to sigh in relief. But the castle had its own will. That night, the corridors whispered with ancient power. Candles flickered, though no breeze moved them. Shadows twisted and shifted, forming shapes that seemed alive, waiting, watching. Bray. Elara sensed it as she walked past a library, her fingers brushing against the cool stone walls. Something was stirring in the castle, something old and patient. Alaric had not slept. He felt it too, a presence, subtle yet undeniable. Bray. His fingers tapped against the armrest of his chair, a rhythm only he could sense, as if the castle itself beat with anticipation. He did not fear it, for he had long learned to respect power. But he understood that this was not ordinary. The ancient curse, the whispering spirits of the ancestors, the weight of the kingdom's destiny, they were aligning. And Elara was now part of that alignment, whether she realized it or not. For days later, while organizing the relics in the hidden chamber she had discovered, Elara stumbled upon a book that seemed older than the castle itself. Its pages were brittle, filled with strange symbols that pulsed faintly in the candlelight. Inspiration. Her fingers trembled as she traced the markings. Something inside her recognized them, a memory not her own, a feeling of longing and warning intertwined. Brr. Alaric appeared behind her, silent as always. His eyes, deep and dark, studied her reaction. Break. You have found something important, he signed, voice measured though silent. Do you understand what it is? Inspiration. Not fully, but it calls to me, like it wants me to do something. Inspiration. Alaric's expression darkened. Few had ever spoken of calling, of force, of intent. He had spent his life taming it, hiding it, fearing it, yet here was Elara, unafraid, drawn into the orbit of something greater than both of them. Brett. You must be careful, he signed. Power does not forgive mistakes. I will not fear it, she signed back, if I stand with you. That night, as Alaric walked through the moonlit halls, he felt the stirrings of something long buried in his blood. Inspiration. The air seemed heavier, charged with expectation. The orb she had glimpsed in the hidden chamber pulsed faintly in his mind, and he realized that the world was shifting in ways he could neither fully understand nor control.
Inspiration. He found Elara in the servants' quarters, writing notes to herself in the margin of the ancient tome. She looked up as he entered, her eyes meeting his with quiet determination.
Inspiration.
You have changed the rhythm of my days, he signed, the words carrying weight he had never allowed anyone to feel. I
do not know what comes next. Then we will discover it together, she signed gently. Inspiration. You are not alone anymore. For the first time in his life, Alaric felt the fragile stirrings of hope. It was dangerous. Inspiration. It was thrilling. And it was utterly terrifying. The next day, an unexpected visitor arrived at the castle gates, a noble from a distant province, bearing gifts and veiled threats. Alaric met him in the grand hall, silent and imposing. Bah. His advisors whispered and fidgeted, but he spoke only through gestures and notes, his calm control intimidating even the most seasoned diplomat. Elara stood at his side, translating subtly, reading the noble's reactions and guiding Alaric through the unspoken currents of power.
Purr.
He marveled at her insight, at her ability to navigate both the world of the Silent King and the world of whispered politics, yet even as she stood beside him, a shadow moved along the edges of the hall.
Inspiration. Unseen eyes watched, calculating. Bear. Jealousy, fear, and malice coiled like serpents in the minds of those who coveted the throne or resented the king's peculiar ways. That evening, Alaric returned to the hidden chamber. The orb glowed faintly, as if sensing his presence. He reached out, hesitant, and touched it. Brr. A pulse ran through him, a vibration, a heartbeat, a whisper he could not hear yet somehow felt. He staggered back, breathless, as visions flickered across his mind, echoes of the ancestors, fragments of the kingdom's dark history. Brr. Alara appeared at the doorway, her expression torn between awe and fear.
Are you well? She signed.
Brr. He shook his head, struggling to regain control. It is stronger than I thought.
Then we must learn it.
She signed. Together, you are not alone. Bray. In that moment, the castle seemed to exhale. The shadows retreated, leaving only the faint pulse of the orb and the presence of the king and the maid who had dared to enter its mysteries. But the calm was deceptive. From the outer walls, a cold wind swept through the battlements, carrying whispers that only the castle could hear. The curse, patient and ancient, had noticed the stirrings of power within Alaric. It had watched him awaken, and it was not pleased. As the night deepened, Alara felt a sudden chill. The shadows in the corners of the chamber seemed to grow longer, stretching toward them, alive with intent. She reached out instinctively, finding Alaric's hand. He grasped hers tightly, their fingers entwined in silent promise. The orb pulsed brighter, and a voice, soft and haunting, echoed in her mind. He who hears the heart may awaken the silence, or awaken the darkness. Alara's eyes met Alaric's, wide and filled with wonder. He nodded once, resolute, though a shadow of fear lingered in his gaze. Together they faced the unknown, bound by trust and a faint glimmer of destiny that had chosen them both. Outside, the wind howled through the castle, and the first hint of snow began to fall, blanketing the world in silence. But within the walls of Valthorn, silence was no longer empty. It was alive, vibrant, dangerous, and beautiful. Snow fell silently over Castle Valthorn, each flake drifting like a whisper of forgotten time. The courtyard, once a place of cold stone and isolation, now glimmered with frost, reflecting the pale light of the moon. Inside, King Alaric moved through the halls with a restless energy. The orb from the hidden chamber pulsed faintly in the corner, its glow casting long shadows across the walls, and with every flicker, the castle seemed to breathe around him. Since the incident with the orb, Alaric felt the stirrings of power within him more acutely. At times it was a whisper, a vibration beneath his skin. At others it was a force that left him trembling and unsteady. He had begun to sense emotions, not just his own, but those of others, as though the world's heartbeat pulsed directly through his veins. He had tried to master it, but control was fragile. Alara, now a trusted companion and guide, observed him carefully. Her eyes, bright with both determination and concern, never left him. "You must rest," she signed one evening, noticing the tension in his shoulders and the slight tremor in his hands.
Alaric shook his head. "Rest is a luxury I cannot afford," he signed back.
The power. It grows. And so does the danger. Alara stepped closer. Her presence was a comfort he had never known. "Then let me help," she signed.
You do not have to face this alone. For the first time, Alaric allowed himself to be guided. Together they returned to the hidden chamber.
The orb pulsed brighter when he approached, as if recognizing both the king and the maid who dared to enter its domain. Alara handed him one of the ancient scrolls, now fully understood to contain instructions for controlling the awakening power. The process was painstaking. Alaric had to focus on the smallest of gestures, on sensing the rhythm of the world without sound, on translating feeling into action. Each failure left him exhausted, but each success, no matter how small, strengthened the fragile connection he was forming with the magic and with Alara. Days passed in this quiet crucible of discipline. The castle seemed to shift in response. Corridors that once felt oppressively long now seemed to pulse with life. Yet the deeper Alaric delved into his own power, the more the shadows of the castle seemed to watch and wait. Inspiration, something ancient and patient was observing him. And Alara often caught glimpses of movement just beyond the edges of candlelight.
One evening, as they practiced controlling a surge of energy from the orb, a sudden tremor shook the chamber.
The orb flared violently, sending arcs of faint light across the walls. Alaric stumbled, gripping the pedestal for support. Bray. Alara's hand shot out, steadying him. "You must not fear it," she signed quickly, her fingers precise.
Aberration. The fear feeds it.
He met her gaze, eyes wide and vulnerable. The moment was intimate, not with romance, but with trust, the kind that forms in the crucible of danger.
Brr. He nodded, drawing strength from her unwavering presence. Slowly he steadied himself, the pulse of power within him slowing to a controlled rhythm. But the castle would not remain still. That night the corridors echoed with an unseen presence. Servants whispered of shadows that moved without cause and cold drafts that carried voices they could not understand. Even Alaric's guards, seasoned and fearless, admitted to feeling a weight pressing down on them, a tension that set their nerves on edge. Inspiration. Alara found him later in the grand hall, staring at the frozen courtyard. Inspiration. His face was pale, his hands clenched. "The castle is alive," he signed. Inspiration. "It feels unsettled." "It has always been alive," she signed back. "But now it senses change." "You are changing, and the world is noticing." He exhaled, a movement more felt than heard, and turned to her. "If I fail, the consequences will be catastrophic."
Alara stepped forward, her hand brushing his.
"Oh, then we will not fail," she signed.
We face it together.
"You are not alone." Their bond deepened with each passing day, a tether stronger than the fears that surrounded them. Brett. Yet danger often comes uninvited, and soon their fragile trust was tested. A messenger arrived from a neighboring province bearing a sealed letter. Its arrival was quiet, almost innocuous, but its contents carried a threat. A rival noble had discovered Alaric's awakening power and saw it as an opportunity to claim the throne or at least weaken his rule. The letter was precise. "Power without control will destroy everything. Choose wisely, or your kingdom will fall." Alaric held the parchment, reading it with his eyes, and felt a surge of frustration and fear. He had never experienced threats in this form. Usually fear came from those who could see him, judge him, or speak against him. Now the danger was different, an unseen enemy, patient and cunning, who would strike at his weakness. Alara watched him, sensing the tension that filled the room. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "We can handle this," she signed. Together. Yet even as she spoke, the castle seemed to respond. A low rumble vibrated beneath their feet, and shadows flickered along the walls. Alaric realized that his powers, and perhaps the ancient curse that had always lingered in his family line, were attracting attention far older than any noble threat. The castle was alive, and it was testing him. That night, Alaric and Alara returned to the hidden chamber to consult the orb. Its light pulsed faster than before, as though impatient. Alaric approached cautiously, placing both hands on its surface. The energy surged through him, stronger and more chaotic than anything he had yet experienced. Alara guided him, her hands moving over his to steady the flow.
"Focus on the rhythm of your heart," she signed. "Feel it, do not fight it." He closed his eyes, sensing the pulse beneath his skin, the vibration of the world around him, and the echo of his ancestors' power.
Slowly, he began to synchronize, matching the rhythm of the orb, feeling the energy bend to his will. For a moment, there was harmony, a balance between control and release, fear and courage. Then, without warning, a surge of energy erupted from the orb, flinging Alaric backward. Elara caught him just in time, her arms wrapped tightly around him. Brrr. The chamber shook, dust and debris falling from the ceiling. The light of the orb flared, then dimmed, leaving a faint glow that seemed almost wary, almost alive. Alaric gasped, his chest heaving. Though he could not hear it, he felt the reverberation of the energy through his body. It nearly consumed me, he signed, eyes wide with awe and fear. You are stronger than you know, Elara signed, her voice calm in her gestures.
But you must be careful. The more you grow, the more the castle, and whatever lingers within it, will test you.
Alaric nodded, the first flicker of determination returning to his eyes. He understood that mastery of his power was not merely about control. It was about courage, trust, and the willingness to face darkness without turning away. But the challenges were far from over. The next morning, while overseeing the guards and servants, Alaric sensed something unusual. A figure moved in the shadows of the courtyard. A stranger, cloaked and silent. He tried to alert the guards, but they could not see what he sensed. Only Elara, standing near him, seemed to understand the subtle shift in his posture and expression. She followed his gaze, eyes narrowing. Desperation. Someone watches, she signed. Not a soldier. Something else. Alaric's jaw tightened. The castle, the orb, the curse. They were no longer distant mysteries. They were forces that could strike at any moment. And yet he was not afraid, not entirely. With Elara by his side, he felt a strength he had never known. That evening, they returned to the hidden chamber. Alaric placed his hands on the orb once more, feeling its power and the pulse of the castle. The shadows shifted around them, and a faint voice, more felt than heard, whispered, "The heart that dares may awaken the world, or doom it."
Elara grasped his hand. We are ready.
Whatever comes, we face it together. Alaric nodded, though the weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon him. He was no longer merely a king or a silent man. He was a force intertwined with magic, legacy, and a world that demanded courage. The heart's crucible awaited, and he was ready to endure it. The night sky over Castle Valthorn was heavy with storm clouds, lightning cutting jagged lines across the darkness. The snow, once gentle, now fell in blinding flurries, covering the courtyard in a storm of white. Inside the castle, King Alaric stood at the heart of the great hall, the orb's glow reflecting in his dark eyes. Elara was beside him, hands clasped, ready to face whatever waited. Since the appearance of the cloaked figure, the castle had seemed alive with tension, desperation. Shadows stretched unnaturally, doors slammed without cause, and whispers of unseen voices filled the corridors. Alaric had spent days preparing, training his senses, learning to master the energy of the orb. Every step had strengthened the bond between him and Elara, and with it, his understanding of his own power. Tonight, however, he knew the trial would be unlike any other. The cloaked figure had not moved. It had waited, patient and still, for him to face the truth of his destiny.
Are you ready?
Elara signed softly. Her eyes held no fear, only steady determination.
Alaric nodded, taking a deep breath. I must do this,
he signed back. Not for the throne, not for power, but for the kingdom, and for us. The cloaked figure stepped forward, its presence chilling and commanding. Lightning flashed behind it, revealing eyes that glimmered like shards of ice. Alaric felt the surge of energy within the figure, a force older than the castle itself. It was neither human nor spirit, but something that had existed for centuries, tied to the bloodline of kings and the silence that had haunted his family.
You have awakened what should have remained hidden, the figure said, its voice echoing in the chamber despite Alaric's deafness. The words struck through the air like knives, felt more than heard.
Do you understand the cost? Alaric raised his hand, steadying himself. I understand, he signed, his movements confident and firm. I will face whatever comes. I am not alone. Elara stepped closer, her hand brushing his, and he felt a warmth that steadied the tremor of fear inside him. Together they approached the orb. Its light pulsed faster now, synchronized with the beating of their hearts. Bert. The cloaked figure moved with them, circling, its presence pressing down like the weight of the storm outside. Then show me, it said. Show me if the heart can command what the mind cannot, if courage can bend what power will not yield. Alaric reached out and placed both hands on the orb. A surge of energy flowed through him, stronger than anything he had ever felt. The chamber shook, stones vibrating beneath their feet. His vision blurred, and he felt as though the world itself was pressing against him, demanding control, demanding submission. Elara's hands found his, grounding him. Feel it? She signed. Do not fight it. Let it flow through you, not against you.
For a long moment, Alaric hesitated.
The power was overwhelming, a storm inside his chest, and the whispers of ancestors, of the curse, of the kingdom's expectations, pressed on his mind. He could have turned away, surrendered to fear, allowed the darkness to consume him. But he did not. He focused on Elara, on her calm presence, on the trust that had grown between them. He felt her courage, her belief in him, and he let that belief guide him. Slowly, the chaos began to bend, to respond to his will. The energy that had threatened to tear him apart now flowed like water, controlled and purposeful. The cloaked figure stepped closer, its form shimmering. Impressive, it said. But power without compassion is nothing. Can you wield it for more than yourself?
Alaric's gaze met Elara's. I will, he signed.
I will protect, not destroy. I will give life, not take it.
The orb flared one last time, and a wave of energy swept through the chamber. Shadows that had lurked in every corner recoiled and vanished, leaving only the soft glow of the orb.
The storm outside seemed to quiet, the snow falling gently once more. The cloaked figure's hood fell back, revealing a face both ancient and familiar. The first king of his bloodline, a spirit bound to the curse that had haunted the royal line for centuries. Its expression softened.
Then the silence is broken, it said.
Not through force, but through heart. You are worthy.
Alaric felt the weight lift from his chest, the burden of isolation and fear replaced by clarity.
For the first time in his life, he heard something. Not with ears, but with understanding. The pulse of the world, the heartbeat of the kingdom, and the unspoken connection between himself and Elara. Elara smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. You did it, she signed. You have freed yourself, and the castle. He reached out and held her hand, the gesture carrying all the words he could not speak aloud. We did it, he signed back. Together. The spirit of the first king nodded and began to fade, leaving behind a calm that was almost tangible. Bird. The orb dimmed, resting in the pedestal like a sentinel now at peace. The curse that had haunted the family for generations was broken, not through power or fear, but through trust, courage, and love. The next morning the sun rose over Orinthia for the first time in what felt like ages, casting golden light across the castle towers. Alaric walked through the halls, not as a man weighed down by isolation, but as a king who had faced his fears and mastered his power. He could feel the castle's pulse, calm and steady, responding to him rather than testing him. Elara followed closely, her presence a constant reassurance. The bond between them had transformed, forged in trials and tempered by shared courage. They no longer needed words to understand each other. Their hearts spoke a language older and truer than any voice, inspiration. Yet life in the kingdom was not without challenge. Nobles whispered in the halls, wary of the young king who had defied not only the curse but the expectations of history. Inspiration.
Alaric met them with quiet authority, his silence now a symbol of wisdom and restraint rather than weakness. Elara stood at his side, guiding, advising, and remaining the constant force that had helped him endure the crucible of power.
One evening, as they overlooked the courtyard from the high terrace, Alaric signed, "The kingdom is ours to protect, but I will not do it alone."
Elara smiled, brushing a hand across his.
Inspiration. And you will not. We are partners in every sense. For the first time, Alaric allowed himself a moment of true peace. The frost on the courtyard sparkled like diamonds in the sunlight, the castle's shadows softened, and the world beyond seemed open, full of possibilities. He had faced the heart of darkness, embraced his destiny, and emerged stronger, not just as a king, but as a man capable of love, trust, and hope. Yet, even as they stood together, a faint wind stirred through the battlements, carrying whispers of the mountains, the forests, and the ancient powers that still lingered in the world. The castle had been quieted, but it was still alive, still watching, and still protective of its secrets. Alaric and Elara understood this, and they accepted it not with fear, but with respect and readiness. In the days that followed, Alaric's rule became marked by wisdom and compassion. He no longer feared the isolation that had once defined him, for he had found connection in trust and courage. The kingdom, sensing the change in its king, responded with loyalty and devotion. And through it all, Elara remained by his side, a constant reminder that even in a world filled with shadows, light could endure. Together they walked through the castle halls, past the chambers that had once held fear and mystery, now filled with warmth, understanding, and life. The orb rested in the hidden chamber, silent but vigilant, a symbol of the trials they had faced and the strength they had found within themselves. Alaric paused at a window, looking out at the snow-covered kingdom. He could feel the pulse of the world again, steady and calm. And though he could not hear it with his ears, he understood its rhythm perfectly, a rhythm of hope, courage, and renewal. Elara stepped beside him, her hand finding his. They stood together in silence, not because they could not speak, but because words were unnecessary. They had faced darkness, mastered power, and emerged transformed. The silence between them was full of meaning, full of life, and full of the promise of the future. And somewhere in the quiet the castle seemed to sigh, as if acknowledging the triumph of heart over fear, trust over isolation, and courage over darkness. The curse was gone, but the lessons endured, etched into the stones and the hearts of those who had lived through it. The storm had passed. The kingdom had endured. And Alaric, the king born of silence, had found not only his voice, but the strength to protect the world he had inherited, and the love he had chosen to embrace.